The story opens with Carolyn walking barefoot down a dark Virginia highway, smiling despite the fact that her silk dress is drenched in the blood of a detective she has just murdered. Carolyn is a Palapi, one of a group of orphans taken in decades ago by an ancient, godlike being known only as Father. Father raised the children in Garrison Oaks, an ordinary-looking neighborhood that hides an extra-dimensional repository of universal knowledge, the library. To forge the children into masters of specific cosmic catalogs, Father subjected them to unspeakable horrors. Carolyn, mousy and frizzy-haired, often dressing in a bizarre ensemble of a Christmas sweater, spandex bicycle shorts, and leg warmers, studies languages. Her adopted brother David, a hulking, muscular giant who wears an Israeli flak jacket and a bloody lavender tutu, studies war and murder. Margaret, a filthy, foul-smelling woman whose mind was broken by Father repeatedly murdering her, explores the forgotten lands of death. Jennifer, a gentle healer, relies on a silver marijuana pipe to cope with her trauma, while Michael, a feral, barely clothed man, communes with animals. Now, Father has vanished, and a lethal, invisible barrier known as a Raysack aerial has been erected around Garrison Oaks. Even Father's ancient tiger ally, Nobunaga, dies instantly when attempting to cross it. Carolyn deduces that the barrier is anchored by a physical token and only targets those directly connected to Father's world. To retrieve the token and seize control of the library, she needs an ordinary American. Carolyn's chosen pawn is Steve Hodgson, an average-built, decent-hearted plumber, harboring deep guilt over his past as a teenage burglar. To secure his unwavering obedience, Carolyn orchestrates a ruthless setup. She approaches Steve at a bar with a duffel bag containing over $300,000, stolen from a bank using mind-controlled tellers, and hires him to break into Detective Miner's house. During the burglary, Carolyn casually murders the detective, deliberately leaving Steve's prints on the weapon and framing him for a capital crime, so he will become a desperate fugitive entirely dependent on her. Steve is sent to a county jail where he is interrogated by Erwin Leffington. Erwin is a massive, gray-haired, fiercely competent ex-Special Forces operator turned Homeland Security agent, whose legendary combat history makes him utterly fearless. Their interrogation is brutally interrupted when David attacks the jail. Wielding a bronze spear on a fine chain, the tutu-clad giant slaughters the guards and lawyers with horrific speed and joyful sadism. Erwin narrowly survives by bluffing that he knows Carolyn, causing David to pause just long enough to kidnap Steve and vanish into the night. Concurrently, Carolyn and Michael track down a rapper who has illegally imprisoned a majestic male lion named Dresden and his cub, Naga. After Carolyn allows David to exact brutal vengeance on the rapper, she secures Dresden's oath to protect her human pawn. Steve wakes up in the librarian's chaotic safe house, hosted by a mind-controlled widow. Facing the threat of a death sentence or David's wrath, Steve agrees to Carolyn's demands. She outfits him with a pistol and an earpiece, instructing him to jog into Garrison Oaks to find the token. As Steve crosses the barrier, he remains unaffected by the magical ward, but he immediately triggers Father's physical sentinels, a vicious pack of neighborhood dogs led by a massive mountain dog named Thien. The dogs swarm Steve, tearing into his flesh and dragging him to the asphalt. Just as he is about to be ripped apart, Dresden and Naga arrive. The lions ferociously defend Steve, engaging the endless horde of dogs. Steve manages to drag the severely wounded Naga into an abandoned taxi. Looking back, he sees Dresden fighting to his last breath, burying himself under a mountain of furious dogs to buy their escape. Bleeding and desperate, Steve drives the dying lioness to a veterinary clinic, forcing the terrified staff at gunpoint to treat Naga. Erwin, tracking the chaos, corners Steve there. Displaying profound compassion, Steve surrenders peacefully on the sole condition that Erwin protects Naga, then gives up Carolyn's location. Before the military arrives at the safe house, Carolyn demonstrates her terrifying reach by calling the White House switchboard. Using ancient, classified codes stolen from Father's enemies, she forces the president to publicly pardon Steve on live television, threatening to expose deep state secrets if he refuses. Erwin calls in a massive military strike, surrounding the widow's house with elite Delta Force soldiers, Bradley fighting vehicles, and Apache helicopters. However, Carolyn has meticulously orchestrated this exact confrontation. David eagerly charges out, his brutal combat magic making him an unstoppable blur as he slaughters the heavily armed soldiers and brings down the helicopters. Amidst the carnage, Carolyn unleashes an ancient optical weapon that blinds Erwin and commands the remaining Apache pilots to commit immediate suicide, crashing their gunships in fiery explosions. With the military decimated, Carolyn enacts her ultimate gambit. With terrifying ease, she casually reaches up to the sky and extinguishes the sun. The sky instantly turns black, and the earth is plunged into a freezing, apocalyptic darkness. Amidst the burning wreckage of the helicopters, Carolyn finally confronts David at the edge of the barrier. Knowing she cannot defeat him in a fair fight, she baits him with submissive flattery, waiting for him to lower his guard before viciously tearing away his anatomy. Enraged, David tortures Carolyn, dragging her across the asphalt and slowly crushing her bones, promising to resurrect and torture her for eternity. But Carolyn's agony is a calculated trap. Just as David reaches the absolute pinnacle of his sadistic triumph, Carolyn signals the temporarily blinded Erwin, who fires his pistol. The bullet obliterates the side of David's head. Before David can die, Carolyn uses her mastery of forbidden knowledge to whisper an ancient word of power, freezing David completely outside of time. She traps his consciousness at the exact unending moment of his ultimate agony and despair. Using his perpetually suffering spirit as an infinite energy source, she hurls his frozen body into the sky to serve as a new, heat-radiating, pitch-black sun. Meanwhile, the broken Margaret approaches Carolyn. Seeking an end to her endless wandering in the outer darkness, Margaret begs to be burned alive in Father's bronze bull, the same agonizing death David once suffered, hoping the extreme pain will serve as a beacon to guide her shattered soul home. Unfazed, Carolyn grants her sister's horrific final request, roasting Margaret alive. Carolyn and Steve finally cross the threshold into the library, a vast, extra-dimensional pyramid where the universe hangs as a glowing cloud of lights from the ceiling. At the apex, they find a young, platinum-blonde girl. Carolyn explains she is Mithraganhi, an ancient cosmic entity who served as the previous sun. Without hesitation, Carolyn slits the child's throat. Steve is absolutely horrified. He realizes that Carolyn is not just pragmatic. Father's relentless physical and psychological torture has completely frozen her humanity. Carolyn explains the truth of Adoption Day. Father had deliberately lured a nuclear missile to their neighborhood to orphan the children so he could forge them into his successors. Father routinely tortured them, such as burning Michael's eyes out daily, to ensure they were properly motivated. Steve, it turns out, was Carolyn's childhood best friend, banished by Father specifically so his memory would serve as the heart coal that would keep Carolyn from losing her sanity entirely. Operating on a terrifying cosmic scale, where normal human emotions no longer register, Carolyn casually discusses the ensuing global famines and earthquakes caused by her ascension. Steve recognizes that the only way to reach her buried humanity is through a profound, jarring act of selfless love. Declaring that he must demonstrate the true meaning of compassion, Steve douses himself in highly flammable alcohol. Before Carolyn can stop him, he strikes a lighter and burns himself alive. Steve's agonizing, self-inflicted death shatters Carolyn's emotional ice. Over the following weeks, she struggles to resurrect him, failing multiple times before finally succeeding. When Steve awakens in the library's luxurious penthouse, he finds a profoundly changed Carolyn. The perpetual tension and cold rage have vanished from her face. Moved by his sacrifice, and realizing he was her childhood best friend from before Father destroyed their lives, Carolyn renounces her path of vengeance. She promises to undo the devastation she has caused. She restores the yellow sun, calms the tectonic plates, and uses her godlike power to rain food from the clouds to end the global famine. No longer a cruel tyrant like Father, Carolyn assumes control of the universe as a silent, benevolent guardian. Leaving the library hidden, she relocates to a quiet, snow-covered farmhouse in Oregon. There she reunites with Michael and his animal companions, finally finding peace as the warm light of a new spring dawn washes over them. Months later, Erwin is happily serving a cushy 10-year sentence in a federal high-security prison. His legendary status earns him the utmost respect from both guards and inmates, allowing him to live in relative peace. One evening after lights out, the concrete floor of his cell ripples, and Carolyn rises through the solid stone. She informs Erwin that Father's ancient cosmic enemies are beginning to move against her. Needing someone highly competent to handle the brutal physical errands she is ill-suited for, she offers the aging soldier a job. Without hesitation, he grabs his paperback novel, takes her hand, and steps into the unknown, ready for his next war.